Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Niagara this morning, Monday, May 13th. Gosh, we're almost halfway through May.
God, I gotta get out I gotta start getting out my Christmas card list.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
yeah,
here any day.
yeah. Well, that's for sure. Yeah, and actually, you think about this: that hey, if you're going to be, if you're a small business, even or even a fairly large sized business, and you want to send out Christmas cards, you probably got to get them ordered by, July, August, September.
Yeah, really. So, all right, everyone. Look, it's time now to start buying your Christmas stuff. It's almost too late to get the Halloween stuff. So, like, if you haven't got that, you better get going because, any day it's going to be here. I think
Yeah,
Canada Day's already passed, hasn't it? Oh, maybe we still got a couple days before.
Are you too late for your Canada Day cards? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well,
All right.
you snooze, you lose. I mean, seriously, we've been warning you since January that the year's almost over.
Yeah, I know. It's so bad, isn't it?
Metaphysical Mike.
Morning, Mike. Right. Unpaid rents, arrests, arson, fed up landlords. Did you read that? Landlords are fed up, especially small landlords. And actually, 30% of all, well, actually, most landlords in this country are actually something like 68% of all landlords are actually own less than 5 properties, and some and a lot of them only own one.
Well, you said, yeah, well, I was a small landlord, or I had 2 townhouses, then I had one townhouse that I rented out. And of course I had a house. I mean, I was so out of it. I had to knock on the door of my first renter and said, I'm sorry, I can't give it to you for what I said I was. I want you to, I know I said that and all that, but I need $20 more a month. I made a mistake. If I give it to you for this, I'm losing money. And so she understood, and I got $20 more, but that would just just break even from the money I was paying out. I really messed up in my calculations, and according to the Landlord Tenant Act, I could have
you could have been in trouble.
$65 more per month. That's how they gauged the property when I asked them how much I should, what was the maximum, and it was $65 more than I was charging, but I had to charge the tenant $20 more.
And they can't even tell you. They can't even tell you today with impact. Okay, so unpaid rent is on the increase. That's for sure. All right, and be very careful out there. If you're not paying your rent, you can get into serious trouble. There's landlords that are now operating databases of unpaid rent.
That's not new, though. That's not new.
That's no, but it's a private and shared.
Yeah, but that's not new. They've been doing that for a while.
Yeah. There's basically, the other thing is, and I've come across this a number of times, and it boggles the mind. There was people who've set fire to their units, who've been arrested, and they're still getting back into their units. The landlord and tenant board is basically okay with them. Now, I think that to some extent, what is happening here is the landlord is issuing the wrong notices, because there's a lot of notices out there. There's a lot of applications you can make out there, and if you don't make the right ones, it can end up being a real nightmare for landlords. So making the right application is all important.
The first line of defense for anybody that's going to rent, and it's not bulletproof, but it's almost bulletproof. It is a really good shield, is to check into like the one thing you want to do is to check into their credit.
Credit
If you
history.
check into somebody's credit history, it tells you a lot about that person. If the credit history shows that they're good at paying their bills, or they might, even if they aren't making a whole lot of money, but they're paying their bills, that's the person you want. If you look into the credit history, you can get a lot. The credit history tells you most of the time if a person's not, their credit's no good, they're a risk. And it's like,
again, a person could be a person who doesn't have a great credit history, but has always paid their rent.
Well, you'll find that out in the credit history.
Yeah.
That's what you'll find out. You'll find out how much they owe, if they owe somebody. So what you're going to have to do is look into the credit history. And that's what I did.
But for example, if they've always paid their rent, but yet they've got $23,000 of student debt, right?
Well, I'm not talking about that, am I? I'm talking about somebody that welches on their bills. Somebody has student debt. That's a far cry from somebody that's not paying for their car loan, or they're not paying their Leon's bill for the 1 cent event thing. Owe money all over the place. If you find somebody like that, stay away from them. I had a prospective tenant come to my place one time. It was a real estate agent that knew my friend that was a real estate agent. He gave her my number, and she came in. Oh, I got this guy. You know, he's great. He's asking me where to go. And she was just singing his praises. What a great guy he is. He had lots of money and all that. I almost didn't do a credit check on him, but I did anyway, just to cover my ass, because my real estate agent friend told me never, ever rent to anyone before you do a credit check. So I got, oh, sure. And he signed out, and I went and got a credit card. The guy owed money from here to Kingdom Come, but he pulled into the drive with a brand new truck. It sparkled. He was dressed. His wife was dressed to the nines. His kid was dressed very well. They looked like they were very affluent, but they didn't have a penny. They owed money everywhere. They owed money to the last renter, the last place they lived. They owed money to stores, like department stores. They owed money on their credit cards. So if you find someone like that, not somebody that comes to you and in a jalopy, but has student loans out, but has been paying their rent, but then they're okay. Not the person that looks like $1 million but hasn't got a pot to what in. And those are the people you want to stay away from. So that's your first line of defense, and you can talk to Maria Recruit about that. She does a pretty good investigation into any of her tenants, and she hasn't been stiffed ever since she's done that.
The interesting thing about exactly. Talking about Maria Recruit, and she hasn't been stiffed in any of her things. She always is highest. She's always double checks everybody. And the one thing about Maria Recruit is you might, when you first start with her, your rent may be high, but your rent's never going to go up, even if you're 25 years with her.
Well, let's put it this way too. And I've sat in a couple of their meetings, online meetings that they had, landlords. She's part of a landlord type of collection of other landlords. And really, if they do everything right, their percentage of getting stiffed is very low. They're about 96% good. If they follow the rules and guidelines they set out for each other, and that's also for the tenants. The tenants can do the same thing, research the landlords, and if each one is doing their duty, then a tenant can find a good place to live with a good landlord, and the landlord can get a good tenant, and everybody's happy. But if you get a lousy tenant and you got a lousy landlord, then that's where the problems happen. And the people that were in this video that you put out, I can't understand how they made the mistakes that they did in renting who they did.
Yeah, the problem here is there are some people out there that are doing some, some pretty horrible things. For example, Open Room is putting up thousands of orders on there, but the last thing that Open Room should be publishing is orders that are for people who are evicted for non-fault, evictions. Because those people very often have paid their rent up to date. If you're evicted for what's called an N12, which is personal use, or for an N13, which is that you're demolishing the place, those are non-fault evictions, but you can't publish them on Open Room. Right? And they shouldn't be published on Open Room. The only ones you should be publishing on Open Room are the ones where they've been evicted for non-payment of rent, evicted for arson, arrest, that type of thing. In fact, actually, there's some real oddities about this. You can be evicted for an illegal act, but an illegal act doesn't have to be a criminal act.
What's an illegal act that is not a criminal act?
That's exactly my question. Right, and this is actually one of the oddities in the Landlord and Tenant Act in the RTA.
That's kind of open to interpretation, isn't it?
Exactly. And here's the thing: I would also say that if there's an illegal act, surely there has to be an arrest.
I would imagine, but I don't know what they're getting at there, and it has to be defined a bit better for us. But in one particular case there where somebody lit the place on fire, and then when they put the fire out, they were still allowed to stay there.
Yeah, I know, that's ridiculous.
They didn't get any money off of them. And one of the biggest things is that these people end up not completely unaccountable. They may go on the bad person's list for possible renters, but they don't have to pay for anything. They don't have to fix anything. We go through this periodically on our nonprofit. Somebody destroys the place, and what are you gonna do? But then they get right back on the list. Yeah. And then we found out one of our real problem tenants got right back on the list and was about to go back out into another Kiwanis housing thing, because the Niagara Regional Housing is just like bureaucratic bunglers, like every government thing. So they were going to take this problem tenant and dump her in another, and obviously, and fortunately for us, our eyes were open. Somebody figured that out and kind of warned them: do not send that person here. Do not do that. We don't have to go through this 3 months of evacuation or 4 months took, and we don't want another unit destroyed. Get them out. If you want to put them somewhere else, do that, but you better put a big warning on them.
And think about this, is that if they do 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 worth of damage, that's money that your organization has to come up with in order to do the repairs, in order that a new tenant can move in there.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. And assuming that the new tenant was going to be a well-behaved, a well-behaved person.
Well, the thing is, my issue here is no matter how much damage they do or how many bad things they do, how much they cost you money, there is no recompense.
Yeah.
The only thing you can do is put a bad mark on them when they if another prospective landlord can find them and say, oh no, I'm not going to rent to you. And then they end up going to the public health, and then finally they always find them a place, and then they do their same thing all over again. It's I don't know what you're going to do with people like that. I just don't.
I don't. You see, why are people like that? That's actually the question that kind of boggles my mind.
Well, they're bitter, they're jealous, they're hateful. They are unaccomplished people, and they hate, and they don't take their situation for what it is. I mean, if you're a poor person and you didn't find good work and you had a couple bad relationships, and it's put you in the lower tier some way around the way, well, you have to accept that and build yourself back up again. But what happens is a lot of people get really jealous and resentful, and then they hate you, and then they hate the person that's giving them charity.
We have a problem of hate around too much in our society today. And that hatred is almost like, Dave, you're a landlord, or you used to be a landlord. I hate you because you're a landlord. No, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
There's no point of that at all. But we've got too much hatred in our society.
Yes, we do. We have a lot of hatred and bitterness, and people that do destroy other people's places where they're renting or don't pay them. They're bitter and resentful, and well, it's just, there's a lot of that out there. What are you going to do about it? I can't tell you. But it's in the long run, though. Your best bet, if you're a landlord, is to go through careful background checks for every one of your tenants. The number one is the credit rating. If you find somebody's credit, like I had tenants that did not have a whole lot of money coming in, but according to their credit rating, they didn't have outstanding bills. They may have had a loan or something like that, but they paid the loan off every month. So they didn't have outstanding bills. So if you do, that's the first thing. And that's the first thing that almost everybody asks when they try to establish your character. And one of the things about character, now it's not universal and it's not 100%, but you'll find a lot out of a person's character if they pay their bills. That tells you something about that person if they pay their bills and they pay them on time, and they don't get behind the eight ball. Now, everybody can get behind the eight ball once in a while, but if you dig yourself back out of it again. But if you have a consistent history of getting in debt, not paying your bills, and that kind of thing, you don't want that person as a tenant, because they're likely going to do that to you,
Yeah.
So that's the first line of offense. And then the other ones, you'd have to go to Marie Recruit. And this business about recommendations, landlords are recommending a tenant, or tenants are recommending a landlord or something like that. I wouldn't go too far on that. I mean, that's a little bit of a good thing, but if a landlord wants to get rid of a tenant, they'll promise them a letter of recommendation so they'll go somewhere else. So you can't take that as a solid, but if you phone the landlord, you probably be able to learn something from that landlord, if that tenant was good or not. So those are the things you can do. Unfortunately, there's some very bad tenants out there, making it very difficult for landlords. And what we do need now is more space to rent. People need more places to rent. And if they're not getting these places, then the price of rent goes up. And that's because some of these landlords are withdrawing their property.
Yeah. And Mike makes the point that poverty creates chaos. This created poverty is going to cause rebellion, most likely. Moving on.
Well, you gotta scare Paul K. Lemire and tell him it's going to be a socialist revolution.
There are some people that when they define what socialism is, they're a million miles off of it from what I understand socialism to be.
Well, from what I've heard lately, it's instant Venezuela. So if you have social medicine, you're going to turn into Venezuela the next day. Anyway, I heard, Mike, that pitchforks were on sale at Home Hardware. Let's get ready.
All right. Moving on. On a related subject, we're building. Why are we building houses more for investors than anything else? This is actually a comment that comes from the Toronto Star, one of their opinion pieces, and basically they're saying that the government's narrow focus is adding more housing, but begs the question why we're building housing for investors. And it's not a case of, this writer of this, it winds back the clock, says from the first time when he got a home, it wasn't a case of having to fight with corporate investors to actually buy a home. It was that you'd be fighting with 2 or 3 other normal people to buy a home. And where he is right now, he's got corporate a lot of single family homes are being swallowed up by groups like Core Development Group, that has got $1 billion or more fund for purchasing single family homes to rent them out.
Well, one thing you have to do when you go to buy a house, you have to ask your realtor about the competition for that house. And the first thing you want to ask them is, are they normal people?
Yeah.
And I mean, if they're funny looking, abnormal people, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about corporations. Yes, when you go to buy a house today, one of your competitions is a corporation. Prior to COVID, 1 out of every 7 houses in the United States was being bought up by a corporation or a business to then be turned into rental property or reuse of the property. Well, all those signs you say, we buy houses, that you will buy your house, those usually go into a corporation and they drive the prices up of houses. And that's what they do.
Well, so they're buying low.
Sometimes they're buying high, and that's the problem. They're not going to lose their money. They're an investment company, so they can push the price of real estate up by buying as many houses for a higher price. Then do a small adjustment, rent them out, or resell them.
What is happening
for a much higher money if they've already driven the price up? That's an old trick. The old stock market trick back in that's what John Kennedy Sr. did. They would pick a stock, and a bunch of wealthy people would buy lots and lots of that stock, and it would excite the stock market, and lots of people would invest in it. Meanwhile, as it goes up, as it's still heading up, the guys that started the investment pulled all their money out. Now they've made a profit of 5 or 10% on their investment, maybe more. And then all these other people are keep buying it. And then it does a correction, and then it all falls. Yeah. So they were automatic. And this is what the housing thing do, whether or not they're doing this by design or not, but they're buying up a lot of houses, which pushes the price of the houses up for us.
And the other thing, what they're doing is, particularly in Toronto, where there's a lot more of these, they're buying semi-detached or terraced houses and terraced house units, and they're buying whole streets of terraced houses. And what happens is you have the family rental up the top of Unit 1. Unit 2 would be also a family rental up the top half of it. The basement of Unit 1 and Unit 2 would be another rental. And then Unit 3 would be a top half. Unit 4 would be a top half. And then Unit 3 and 4, the bottom half would be another basement rental. So they're turning these things into family homes plus basement rentals. Yeah,
they're doing that in Hamilton quite a bit. Some years ago, and we reported that on this show, that they were buying up some of those modest homes in the old part of Hamilton, And then what they were doing is then converting those homes into rental units, and they were all investment groups that were doing it. So they're an investment group. They're taking the home off the market. So here's an affordable home. They took it off the market and converted it into rental units. So now that rental unit is worth more than the original single family home, which makes the other single family homes in and around there more valuable, which makes them less affordable. And that means the investors come in and buy those as well and convert them into rental units. And then they have the property and they drive the prices up. So if they decide to sell them, they've already made a big profit. Now, this is what it says here is that it has a good, it says here, even the most dysfunctional branch of any democratic government, the U.S. Congress, was able to sit still long enough to ban hedge funds from doing exactly what Core Development Group, that's the one in Canada, is doing in Canada, which means they're buying up houses and properties and competing with the average person for it. And as a business model, take away the morality of it, take away the social insecurity of this. It's really smart. You've got a lot of money, buy a lot of houses. If you buy a lot of houses, you could push the price of those houses up because now you control the market.
Well, is it
part of the market? And then once you've taken those single family homes off the market, then those people are forced to rent from you.
Yeah. Well, and the worst about it is usually traditionally the large corporations that rent out traditionally would be renting like a 200 unit apartment building. So they'd have 200 units in an apartment building, and they might have 3 apartment buildings like on Geneva Street. You go up Geneva Street in St. Catharines, you've got in a particular area, you've got a building that's got about 150 units on it. You've got another next to it, which has got about another 200 units, another next to it with about 150 units again, right? So those buildings that are owned by larger corporations are that's traditionally what larger corporations used to own.
This is a whole different real estate investment thing altogether, though. This is an opportunity that kind of woke up, that investors woke up to, that there's a dearth of real estate. They can get into it, buy it now, buy it cheap, force the price up, and then make sure that we don't have affordable house, so we're going to have to rent.
Yeah,
that's and in the long run, when you invest in a lot of money and you start controlling the market like that, like if corporations are buying 1 out of every 7 houses like they were in the States, they're probably even buying more than that now. Mike Cushman says, normal people, that's me. Normal people bidding against corporations will never win, and that is where we are today. Yes, even abnormal people bidding against corporations will not win. Angela Brown says, investors have money. These are gradually becoming the only part that can afford to purchase the new properties, given high interest rates, supply shortages, etc. That's true, and that's going to continue because it's a fabulous business opportunity. And next thing you know, you're going to have aristocrats owning the properties. You're going to be like Europe or Venezuela. I'll bring up Venezuela. When they had an aristocratic class, they owned just about all the properties. When they do that, guess what? You don't get one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not unless you're renting it. Yeah.
Not unless you have the revolution, and I'm still going to buy that pitchfork.
Mike says, do not forget how it works today. The house up the street was just sold for $700,000. Now your house is worth that. That's true.
Yeah, I don't know.
Except the house in my street, the house in my street is only half the size of my house.
Yeah, well, so you'll have to go double that.
Yeah, That
so Angela says this keeps rents up.
Yep.
And Angela also says, and when they can't rent them, they keep them empty and wait for prices to up and sell off. Well, yeah, about a week ago, I passed by a house on John Street, I think it was, and it was empty, and squatters had broken into it. Squatters had broken into it, and it took the police a long time to get them out. And then the squatters broke into one on Lundy's Lane. Did that more than once.
Yep.
If you leave your house empty, what do you think it's going to do? So they hold on to it investment purposes. And at one time, we had a guest here that told us that they lived around my old neighborhood, between like John Street and Ontario Avenue, River Lane, all those areas. The houses were being bought up and left empty or used as R&Bs, anything just to hold them as investment. And that's also what these corporations are doing. They're buying up houses and leaving them empty. And that's a problem too. I mean, look at all the brownstones in London at one time. They had whole streets of brownstones just left empty. It's going to invite squatters, but other than that, though, it's taking real estate off the market.
And that's actually we were talking about the destruction of housing, and in fact, actually, that's actually what I've heard. You know, I was actually working for a landlord, and we managed to get the tenant out, who caused some damage and whatever. And they said, okay, so now you're free to rent it out again, all right? But do the checks this time, all right? And he says, I'm not renting it out; it's staying empty.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, because renting is just more trouble. But if he had followed the rules, the guidelines, he would have most likely have had a good tenant that paid the rent.
Yeah.
And
his wasn't a case of paying the rent. His was a case of destruction. Again.
Well, yeah. Well, that's how you could still screen your tenants the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know, destruction. Well, I don't know who does that. A handful of idiots do that. Angela Brown says there is a documentary called Push, the movie. It talks about this going on all over the world. Yeah, gets big money. Look, where's the source of sucking money out of the middle class? That's where a lot of money sits, and people who want more money. Think of it as a mine. You know, there's a mine over there, and it's got gold. And if you dig, you can suck that gold out of the ground. Well, the middle class is like that. The middle class has saved money, put investments, had houses, and everything. So that's the gold mine. Suck the money out of the middle class somehow, and you do that by making rents too expensive. You try to suck as much money out of the middle class as you can for your corporation or your company or whatever. Governments do that when it comes to taxes. Where are they going to get their taxes? They get it from the middle class. Investors like this, if they need more money or they want to get more money, the middle class is a gold mine, because middle class people have saved money, put in RSPs, bought homes, bought cottages or whatever. That's the target. Get them. Make things more expensive for them. You can suck the money out of them. Yeah. You can buy homes and then convert them into rental units, and then they're forced to rent because they can't afford the home because you've made it too expensive for them.
The other issue about this is that realtors are often, a lot of these are actually, they're putting a lot of them or chunks of those markets, people like Core Development, who are owning a lot of these single family homes. They're also putting many of these actually on the Airbnb or VRBO market.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the things they do is put them on the Airbnb thing just to keep them sort of solvent for a little bit solvent for a while. That's where you run into the problems where you get these 18 people into an Airbnb and have a party all weekend long and ruin the neighborhood. I don't know. But that's what's happening right now. And I'll have to watch that push. But that's why I think that going to Home Hardware and getting a pitchfork is what we're going to have to do, probably even before the afternoon is out.
I don't know about that. Can't support that.
I don't know. It'd be fun.
All right. Moving on.
Well, you could be a torchbearer. You could be a torchbearer, right? So you don't have to have the pitchfork, but we'll get you a torch with a big tar rag on the end of it, and we'll light it up, and you can run around with the torch. I'll do the pitchforking stuff. Where's the wealthy capitalist?
Yeah. Okay. Nightlight Youth Shelter in Niagara Falls is transitioning to offer family support. So this shelter.
Now, what do you think about that?
Well, it depends what they really mean by family. They're looking to be a family-oriented shelter, but actually, sometimes I wonder whether that's what young people need.
Well, this is a youth shelter that's down on Ontario Avenue, and I know of it because I was down there, and for a time the church that used to be on Palmer Street there, the church and the school, they took in kids, or orphan kids or kids that didn't have homes, and I'm telling you, some of those kids were tough looking kids. I'm telling you, by the time they get to be 14 or 15 years old, when they come walking down the road, you know that they've had a tough life because they look deadly mean, but this is like, it says here, it claims here that Raft and Nightlight are transitioning to, Nightlight Youth is transitioning to family support. And then it goes on and talks about recidivism in there. So they say they've had no problems. The youths are there. They have no problems. And yet then they go on to talk about recidivism, which means people that do crime again, return to crime. And so why is that in there? If we don't have any problems and then they have recidivism, well, that's a problem.
Yeah, and Boys and Girls Club has said of Niagara said after careful consideration, Niagara region decided to reallocate funding elsewhere for youth as the need for family supports has been higher in recent years. But you see a lot of what Nightlight have done has been about those youth who are in serious trouble that don't have family support. Or maybe it's the family that has been the cause of their problems.
Now they say that the Raft and the other youth housing hasn't been to capacity for some time. That's one of the reasonings to switch it over to families. Now we just talked about the high cost of rent and housing, and I'm sure that's part of it. So you're going to have a family that's in trouble and going to need a place to go. And the number one issue always is money. I mean, number two issues could be mental health or alcoholism or whatever. But usually the number one thing that drives people into desperation is money. Yeah. And no money, no food, no houses. So that's probably one of the reasons why they're trying to switch this over to family-oriented organization. But what bothers me a lot, though, is that what about the youth? I have a feeling they're not telling us the truth, and they do have problems with the youth program, and it just might be easier for them to go with family. I'm not so sure. Joanna Turner, executive of director of the club, said in an interview, I've met her, Joanna Turner,
in an interview, Boys and Girls Club in Niagara.
the continuation of the shelter was denied due to recent assessments of Niagara region in a state of homelessness. So there you go. We're right down to there. Homelessness. The club did apply to continue the shelter. It was sustainable and didn't have any problems in the past. However, the region had done assessments and said, okay, this might not be the best use of our facility. So you have a youth service that is working, and it's working well, and it's sustainable. But the region said, okay, that's no good. We're gonna use this for something else. I'm really comfortable with that idea.
I'm not comfortable with it either, because here's the thing: we might well be doing well about youth problems right now, but if we take these facilities away, typically that causes itself a problem, right? And by the way, Angela says she's ready for the pitchfork. She's sign her up.
Okay, you're going to go right under Mike. Me, Mike, Angela. Peter won't do the pitchfork thing. He's got a little bit of a queasy stomach, but we can get him on the torches. Remember, I meant if we buy Angela says, oh, something works really well, so let's get rid of them. Yeah, that's typical government, eh? Well, this is working, so we don't need it anymore. So we'll make something that won't work. Anyway, as far as pitchforks, if we all buy them at the same time, we'll get even more off, I'm sure. If we say, look, if we buy them by the dozen, how much will it cost?
Oh my gosh.
And we tell them, look, if you don't give us a good price, you're the first capitalist swine we're going to stick with this work.
Yeah. Commie Dave there strikes a blow for free beer for the workers.
Yeah. And while I'm at it, look, hardware store, I like to buy a hammer and a sickle. I have to trace them on this flag. Mike Christmas says, I am more of a
shillelagh guy.
Shillelagh guy. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we can have a good old Irish Donnybrook and crush a couple of heads. That's good. I don't know.
I'm up for that. I'm not up for pitchforks at dawn.
Oh, Peter, really? You're going to have to expand your horizons, man. Anyway, but back to this. Yeah, so they have this youth program that's working, and there's looks like there's a reduction of need. So they're going to shift over to family. But it has to do with homelessness. And what are you going to do about those homeless youth anyway? They're going to still be there. Yeah. You're going to push them back out on the street, or they're going to, I mean, seriously, what are you going to do with them? And the business about recidivism, right? If some of those units are used for youth because of the recidification, or if that is even a word, or they're reoffending, and you try to help them stop reoffending, where are you going to put them? You start putting them in jail.
Yeah.
You don't want to put them in jail until they get to be serious criminals. You want to give them a chance first. And once they're in jail, that's it. They're going to be criminals. They're going to learn a lot more about criminal behavior, and that's going to give them less opportunities going forward about jobs or anything else. Because the thing they know is criminal activity. They know how to sell dope. They know how to do a little B&E or bust into a car or something, but they don't know how to use a hammer and a sickle or just a hammer and a nail.
Yeah. Hammer and a sickle. Yeah. That's the Chinese symbol, isn't it?
No, that was the universal communist symbol that first started in, I think, the Bolsheviks or the Mensheviks. But anyway, it got on the Soviet flag. The hammer and the sickle became universal.
Flag, right, That was on the Soviet flag. That's right. Yeah, it's a long time since I've seen the Soviet flag, you know.
Well,
yeah. La Marseillaise, eh?
Who could? Of course, I remember the one commercial they had. I forget what company it was. It might have been a Canadian company, but they had this fashion show basically where they had Soviet fashions, and it was like Svimver, and it was somebody wearing the same thing with just a small change here and there. Svimver, workwear, nightwear, and all this stuff. And of course, it got the Soviets all mad. Chinese got no sense of humor either. There was a movie. It was a really bad movie called, I don't know, When the Chinese Come or something, and they invaded France, and they were all really serious and stuck up and super serious, and the Chinese got mad with that characterization, saying, "We like to have fun like everyone else. The chairman said so."
Okay, so let's move on to something a little bit later. Ship watchers meet at Lock 8 on the Gateway Park in Port Cockburn to watch the ships going by.
I bet you almost all of them are men. I bet you almost all of them are men, because that's a man thing, basically.
It's a man
watching
thing.
Ships and trains and big equipment like that. Don't you think?
Well, yeah, you do see the occasional woman there, but not very many of them, I would say. Yeah, and I actually kind of find it weird. Whilst I'm interested in the ships, it's like I'm not that interested. I'm not going to be sitting in a park, kind of going, "Oh, that's the you know." And I can't think of a name of a ship.
Algoma or the, whatever.
Yeah, well, that's the Algoma Watchman or the Algoma Lockman, or, no, I'm not going to be doing that, right?
No, but I don't know. There are people who like doing that. I mean, people like trains and cranes, and like it's usually a man.
Used to be on some stations in England. Used to go into the station. You'd be on a train that was pulling into the station, and at the end of the station, where people don't normally go, there's about 15 or 20 guys there, all all looking at the trains coming by.
Yeah, and look, there's TV shows where it talks about the big machine or the big ship or how it functions. I find them interesting.
I'm more interested.
I'll tell you the difference. I'll tell you the difference between men and women. I was at OPG at the old coal plant at Nanticoke, and they had to change out these big filters, and they're huge. They're really, really long, big, huge, heavy things, many tons. So they had to get a special crane to do these super heavy lifts. It took them a week to assemble the crane. It took them about a week just to put the pad where the crane was going to go. And then it took a week for them to assemble the crane. So they needed another crane, and they needed a crew of ironworkers to put this thing together. It was enormous, and it was big, and it was powerful. And every time, and where my lunchroom was, I could watch people walk by. Every guy that walked by that stopped and looked at it, or walked by slowly and looked at it. Whether it's the first or 10th time they've seen it, they were looking at that crane every time it was put together. Yeah. All the women that walked by hardly gave it a second glance. They might have took one look at it and kept going. But every guy slowed down and watched and looked at it. It was of absolutely no interest to any of the women, even if they were in the trades. But every guy, and I'm there watching it, because right there the window is. So guy.
So here was the situation. Everybody out there is actually Dave's watching the watchers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Dave's
that was the only one that made that observation. I'm I wasn't the only one that made that observation. There was other guys saying, and you would talk to the guys, like you would be walking, and even I'd be walking, and then I stop and look at the damn thing, even if I've seen it like a dozen times as it's being assembled, and then it begins to work with the super heavy lifts that they were doing, and it was just like, and you bump into other guys, and we all talk about how great it was and how we admired it, but none of the women you talked to said a thing about it. They just kind of didn't even hardly see it. And that's the difference between men and women in one respect. So that's why I think that just about everybody that's watching these big ships going through the locks, almost every one of them was going to be a man for sure. I mean, I don't think that kind of thing interests women.
Yeah, as I said, that's the same with the plane watchers. Also at Heathrow Airport, one day, there's like a whole load of, like, 150 cars parked on the actual ring road, or outside one of the ring road on one of these areas, because they're actually in close proximity to the end of the runway where the planes come in. And and part of that being in close proximity to there was because they were taking tail numbers and things.
Yes. So in any case, this Seaway Watchers Society there, or club, it was started by what's his name?
Michael Fulson.
Fulson, yeah, I got it written down here someplace.
Yeah, Michael Fulson.
Yeah,
he's a resident of Clayton, in upstate New York, and he comes here regularly to go watch these ships.
Yeah, it's what he does for pleasure. How he escapes the day-to-day grinds is coming up here and watching the big ships go up and down the canal. Well, the canal is 65 years old this year, I think, too, and that's part of the reason. And he started a club, basically, and these people just get off on watching the ships. And I've talked to people that once in a while will just go to the canal and just watch the canal ships go if they've got nothing else to do, and that kind of pleases them. It intrigues them. They think of it keeps the mind off of other things. It's like other people going bird watching, something like that. It's an interest they have, and they want to know what ship is coming through and what kind of cargo that it has. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that's kind of interesting myself. I'd like to know what that ship has.
You could probably find that out. You look at the ship you're coming through, and it's the Algoma New Yorker or something like that. You can tap that into a website, and it will tell you it's currently got 110 tons of grain.
Well, or whatever. It could be the HMS Pitchfork, and it has a hammer and a sickle on it. Actually, when the Soviets used to send ships here, some of them had hammers and sickles on them that went through the Seaway.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
There you go. But so, and not only that, but there's if you talk to people who are into this, they've got books, and you don't even need the books anymore. You can go right on the internet, but they'll tell you about tugboats. Like, I knew that there was a tugboat that was built in 1880, was still in service. And a lot of tugboats, they go back almost 100 years, 100 years ago, because the tugboat, there's nothing changes about the tugboat, only the engines, right? So the shape and everything, as long as the tugboat's retained its shape and the hull is good and it's being taken care of, it can be used over and over and over again. And because a tugboat just has to be a little, very powerful boat that can push a big one around and place it in the right places.
Yeah, absolutely, because the tugboats tug them into position, and they can do so with reasonably a lot of accuracy and push them. Yeah.
So the
tugboats that are used here on the Great Lakes, the Great Lakes cruisers, are actually similar to, but not the same as many of those that are used in the big ports around the world.
No, the tugboats in and around the Great Lakes would have a probably particular design, maybe even the design, but they're typical design. And any tugboats I've seen are pretty much, you would probably not be able to distinguish them too much from ones that was from the ones from 1924 to the ones in 2024.
Probably
now,
not.
People who look into ships look into the tugboats. The ship, sometimes the ship. Like sometimes some of these ships have a long history because they're just made a certain design and they're made to carry a certain cargo. And if they have the design well enough and their engines keep getting replaced and stuff, they can run for a very long time. A little later on, they become scrap and the hulls may be converted to something else. But normally you build another one that's even more efficient, and it usually has to do with efficiencies of space, efficiencies of design that couldn't be utilized prior because of the building techniques. So when people watch these ships go through the lock, they'll know that. They'll know that this particular ship with the cranes are on it, are the ones that are going to fix other ships.
Yep.
You know, if you see one of those ships, I saw them in Nanico come down. They are ships that come in and they've got all kinds of cranes and other things because they're the ones that fix other ships in harbor, and they can go anywhere to do that. And Angela says there are people who watch the watchers too. That would be the way.
I would be in that category. I'd be in that category who watch the watchers, and their reactions fascinating.
Well, I'm not going to tell Mike Folsom that somebody's watching him somewhere. You know, that might be a little disconcerting.
Okay.
Are there people? Okay, I've got the question you asked. Is this an endless thing? Are there watchers of the watchers?
Of the watchers of the watchers, yes.
Yes, they can go on
forever. It could be an endless thing, yes. Okay.
Thousands of people converge. Thousands of people converge on the seaway as 8 people watch the ships, and another 16 watch them, and another 32 watch them that are watching them.
Yeah, maybe the Edmund Fitzgerald might come through the canal someday. Yeah, it's sunk.
That'll be a ghost ship.
Lake Superior.
That'll be a ghost ship.
Ghost ship. Yeah,
that reminds me. That was one of the lyrics in a soon. I've got an earworm going on that's just driving me mad. But I mean, it's a very pleasant earworm, but I can't get rid of it. I listened to Diamonds and Rust by Joan Baez, and it's a fabulous tune. I haven't heard it for years, and I just can't get it out of my head now. And in it, in one of her early parts of her lyrics, they talk about a ghost, and it's bad. Just basically her old boyfriend, I think, and that is a ghost ship, the Edmund Fitzgerald. If that comes through, that definitely is a ghost ship. If I see that, I'm running for the hills.
So, did you see the Aurora Borealis on Friday night?
I did not. Did you?
No, I did not. I didn't see it at all. Apparently, it was visible. Apparently, it was visible from Friday afternoon till Friday night.
It was only visible here and there. My son said he only saw little bits of traces of it. Some of the best pictures I got from one of his friends that way up in Red Lake in Northern Ontario. But you know what? One of the best Aurora Borealis I've ever seen, Northern Lights, was in 1974 when a friend of mine from the States hitchhiked up here, and we were drinking one night in the cab of the hotel, and we walked outside and we saw the Northern Lights in the summertime. We couldn't believe it. So we took off to the outside. Back in those days, Fireman's Park was dark. So we went to Fireman's Park and we looked, and the whole night was just a complete display of Northern Lights. Now, the reason why these particular Northern Lights were so nice is because they had a lot of nitrogen agitation in them. A lot of colors that they normally don't get or more rare. And that's because the two the two prevailing elements of air are oxygen and nitrogen. And when you get the oxygen and nitrogen being excited at the same level in the atmosphere, like about 60 miles up, then it becomes a certain color, more of a bluish color. But if you have the oxygen excited at a lower end and the nitrogen at a higher end, you get more colors. You get more reds and pinks and green and bluish. And it has to do, I've got it written down here. Pink happens with oxygen. Pink 60 miles and below. With nitrogen, you get pink. 120 miles with oxygen, you get red. And you get the oxygen and nitrogen. If they are excited together, you'll get a blue aurora. And if you excite oxygen will go green, and oxygen and nitrogen will go green, purple, and blue if they're sighted together, but if by incoming particles. But if they're in different places, you get different colors.
But a lot of this is due to major geomagnetic storm that has been occurring in the northern hemisphere, brought about by solar flares.
Yeah, storms on on the sun, it shoots out magnetic particles, and that's what's exciting. The fact that you're getting so many colors tells you the energy that's coming in, because normally what you do is you get your regular green ones or barred ones, and when you start getting colors like this, that means you get excitation of nitrogen and oxygen at different levels and together, sometimes separately and sometimes together at different heights in the atmosphere, which attests to the amount of energy. So this is one hell of a solar storm.
Yeah. And actually, it's not yet over, so there's still possibility we might see some more.
Yes. And it could help light our way when we go after the capitalist swine with our pitchforks.
You and the Dave Wheeler revolution, the pitchfork revolution, eh?
It's scary that way. We could use guns, but I mean, really, being impaled with a pitchfork really does scare the capitalist swine, I can tell you.
But you see,
they'll be throwing gold. They'll be running away, throwing money out of their pockets. So we'll have to stop and pick it up.
Well, there's that, but also then they'll be calling up, "Hey, Mr. Policeman, go shoot these commie swine."
Yeah.
All right, it's time for us to be giving it up for the day, I think.
Yes. Well, we have to keep up the Bolshevik thing, the socialist thing, because we got to scare Paul J.K. Lemire out of his pants.
You scare Paul K. Lemire, yeah, like that's going to happen on Tuesday afternoon at 3:00 and only 3:00.
Well, the next time I go and to do the council meeting agenda, I'm going to dress up like Che Guevara.
And you're going to carry the pitchfork, I guess.
Yes, indeed.
I can't imagine you looking like Che Guevara.
No, maybe I'll have to look like I don't know, the Venezuela president, Hugo Chavez. Maybe I'll do that one.
Okay, that's more reasonable.
Okay, well, I got to do my bingo thing, so
yeah,
I will. Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace, everyone. It looks like we might be getting a little bit of a chance going on here. The whole world is unhappy with Israel's murder of thousands of children, and it can't continue. Even the United States, who's turned a blind eye forever to this kind of thing, has had to focus in, and Israel is going to just have to change its leadership and become more reasonable. And let's face it, that BS in Ukraine is out of control. And that has to stop too. Find some reason. Just stop it. There's gallons of young men's blood being spilled for what?
Yeah.
Anyway,